Hey, hey, we are live and I'm excited to be here with a dear old friend and colleague, Jenn Wisegarver. For those who are new to me, I am Cassandra Quinn and I am the founder and CEO of Quinnovate and the creator of Systems DNA. What we are focused on today is talking about one of the important aspects of being a leader and working within systems and processes, which is listening. Jenn, so I don't steal your thunder, do you want to tell everybody who you are and what you do in the world?
Absolutely. So I am a Quinnovator. I am the Director of Relational Operations over at Quinnovate. And I've been also working on taking family systems and small business systems and seeing how we can make them the most efficient. So I love the overlap that I get to have in my different positions. I love everything that I get to learn from Quinnovate and really appreciate it. And I've also been really enjoying doing some speaking coaching and vocal coaching. I'm a singer, and I've been, in this past couple of months, getting back into coaching folks who are also interested in improving their vocal and theatrical skills. So
I love it. And something to, Jenn, is that all right if I share our origin of how we ended up connected in the world?
Oh, yeah.
So, Jenn, when I say old friends, I mean, like, we go all the way back to college, old friends. And we both met in the theater department. We both have theater performance degrees. So I think that is a unique aspect of today's conversation about listening and communicating. My other degree is in sociology. I say, I have a couple of degrees in the study of people. And on top of that, at the time that Jenn and I met, we did not know this about our little baby college selves, but we are both neurospicy, and we have learned that about ourselves on our journeys into our adulthood and our friendship. And I think that having those discoveries about who we are really has improved our abilities as leaders, as communicators, and colleagues and friends. Like, I think it's made our friendship stronger and better. And so I'm just really grateful that we've been able to go on that journey and be in all of these different phases and iterations of who we are and discovery, and be able to share and talk about that today. I also noticed you pouring your coffee. That looked really great. I realized it was our coffee chat, and I drank all my coffee already. All I have is water.
Oh
no. It's fine.
Herbal tea. I made a really fun blue herbal tea today. I wanted to bring some joy to my conversation. So
amazing. I didn't realize it was blue. I couldn't quite tell. So that's awesome. I let as you can see.
We're about.
So part of what inspired this series of our coffee chats is because I have brilliant friends and colleagues like Jenn, and we have these private conversations, and they say these brilliant things, and I'm like, the world needs to hear this. I wish we had a camera right now. I wish we were recording. So Jenn is the second in this series of my coffee chats, in hopes to showcase their brilliance and share that with the world, because I think that there's so many important conversations happening about self-leadership and self-development and growth that is happening behind closed doors. And I think that one of the things I really value about you, Jenn, is your willingness to be vulnerable and transparent. And not only with me, but with the world. You're willing to let people learn from your journey. And so thank you for being that kind of person, not only on the Q crew over at Quinnovate, but in your life in general too, and in the work that you do.
Yeah, I think it's so important. There's so many people that are struggling with things, and they don't even realize that there's an entire subgroup of other humans that are also struggling with that exact same thing, because everyone's quiet about it. And I don't think that there's any shame in having struggles personally, professionally. We're all human beings. And yeah, so I really like to be transparent, because you can't know. I've been working on this new concept that I have. I really dislike it when people say that nobody is coming to save you, right?
Mm.
No one's coming to save you. And I think that in my experience, like that's just not true. Like when you plug yourself into communities, like we are coming for each other, right? And so I just really want to be a part of the we. I want to be a part of that and make sure that people know I'm here to talk, you're here to talk on all of these different aspects. You know?
I really love that, because I think that you're right. There is that phrase, no one's coming to save you. It reinforces that limiting belief that you have to do it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, not only do you have to, like, that the world is like that by design. And it doesn't have to be. I understand why people feel that way. And I understand where maybe sometimes the privileges that you and I have experienced, that we have had some built-in really lovely communities, and or we went seeking communities that end up being really lovely, even if we weren't necessarily naturally put into those communities. But I think that the willingness to talk about what is hard publicly, like you said, shows people I'm not alone, and it's okay to be having those experiences. And in that, in and of itself, creates an opportunity for community. Yeah. And then you go, oh, it's that person is somebody who gets it and is safe. And now that's how all of those relationships get built. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that web forms, right? It goes like ping, 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 ping. All of the people, like all of that energy comes together. And yeah, I really love that. Like when I feel aligned like that, like the people in my life are these like safe people that understand me. Like it's just a great way to live. So I want other people to have that too.
Absolutely. And I think that like that made me think, first of all, I know I just like used a term that sometimes might feel like not clear and or jargony for those who are not in the neurodivergent community, and I call this neurospicy. Would you take a moment and just let us slow down and remember that the intention of this conversation is that other people might be listening and joining us and not have a clue what the heck that is? Could you help me and just give some perspective on that?
Yeah, I always think it's funny when someone is like, oh, I love that term. I'm like, oh, no, I did not make that term. Lots of people. Yeah, so a lot of neurodivergence is on these different spectrums, right? So you can have people with ADHD, you can have people with autism, you know, you can have all these different versions. Even some people that have had trauma in their lives, they might have really similar experience or effects that now makes them behave in a differing, like their brain is now functioning in a different way than someone who's neurotypical. So we will often say something like neurospicy to mean like anyone in this giant spectrum bucket of people who maybe their brains work a little bit differently, or there's different tools that they can use to use their brains the most effectively. I don't know. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that another thing that sometimes happens in these conversations around neurodivergence is that ADHD and autism tend to take the spotlight in that conversation, and not to leave anyone out, but to just expand that more specifically. A lot of times, the neurodivergent community is also going to include people with anxiety, people with OCD, people who with Tourette syndrome, and I'm sure other people who I did not name, but I recognize that because there can be a tendency to over spotlight ADHD and autism, that there are lots of ways that somebody might be neurodivergent that isn't one of those two categories, which is another reason why I like the neurospicy, because then it's more inclusive to say like generally anyone who is wired differently, right? And I think that like where I wanted to kind of go with that is talking more about how that has affected us even before we knew that about ourselves, and how we had to learn to listen and communicate differently. And then the other part to stack questions on you is once you found out about your own diagnoses, if that changed your perspective or how your tools in terms of communication and listening.
Okay.
I know that was a lot all at once.
No, I'm going to break off the first piece. So, in terms of communication, so I think that one of the biggest changes were that I've always just had really big feelings, just forever. Um, and I didn't realize before my diagnosis that feeling the level of overwhelmed that I would feel, or feeling so heightened in situations. And I think some people think about heightened and they think about like, sure, you know, really like high energy, and maybe that's someone that yells a lot, right? Or maybe that's someone, and especially sometimes in you know, femme diagnoses, it ends up being like, well, all of that's happening inside your head. So even if I'm not outwardly yelling, inside it is screaming, and it's really hard for me to, and you'll have like physical symptoms, right, like based on that. So you know, I've been really lucky. I've been married for 12 years, and my partner always was someone who you know, his listening to me, I could say that I was feeling in that way, and not feel judged, and not feel and I think we're all able to do that too at Quinovate. We'll say, like, we'll come into a meeting and literally say, hi, this happened, and I'm dealing with that right now. So, and then we can use tools to say, okay, well, what do we need now to either take care of you, or what kind of a break do you need before you can move on? So all of those I kind of conflated. So all of those are now like post-diagnoses. I know I need that. I know I need to say like, wow, this literally just happened with my kids. I'm going to need 3 minutes to do these tools that I have, and then I'll be ready to have a meeting. Whereas before, I might be upset about that thing with my kids for like over a day. I'll go to bed still overwhelmed with an elephant sitting on my chest, with my brain going 20 miles a minute over something that my kids got over 15 minutes after it happened, you know? So yeah, that was an answer to the first part. And I forget already what the second part is.
Yeah, I think it was just like the ways in which our neurodivergence like shows up and in our life, and how we communicate and listen. And part of the reason too that I decided to do these coffee chats is that I feel like right now, maybe more than ever, people feeling like they can communicate effectively, to connect with people, to bridge these gaps that we are, all these factions and splits and divides that feel like they're getting even bigger by every moment in our culture, I feel like is only going to be solved by genuine connection. And the only ways that we really have our genuine connection is authentic communication. And I think that a lot of times when people think about authentic communication or communication for change, for social justice, for social cause, for whatever, that they're thinking about the, what am I saying? What am I communicating verbally? What are the words? And there's so much more to authentic connection and communication than what are the words that I'm going to say. And a big part of that is how we listen to each other. And I think that that's what's causing these divides, at least contributing to it, is that there's a lot of shutting down of being willing to authentically listen. And so it made me realize that a framework that I had created over the years of working with leaders and working on leadership skills is our framework for spherical listening. And it's to address the fact that we can train ourselves to listen in a multitude of ways, where a lot of times, as we know, like people are listening to respond, and or maybe in some settings, maybe if somebody's tuning in now, which by the way, if you are listening in now, say hi, even if we don't get to see it until after we wrap up our conversation. Jen and I love to continue conversations, and we'll go and check out to see if anybody had questions or comments. And then if you're catching this as a replay, let us know then too. We love to see that the conversation is continuing to ripple out, even if you're not live right now. But all of that to say, sometimes if somebody is listening to a conversation like this or whatever, the other primary reason that people are listening besides to respond is to like learn, right? And there's so many other ways that we can train our brains to tune in and to pay attention. And that communication, just like the breath it takes to literally speak, is that there is the breath in and the breath out. And the words are literally the breath out, right? But the listening is the breath in. You have to take in the information in order to know what it is that you are then putting back out, right, into the world. So that's really like just to give some framework about why I want to have this conversation today anyway, which I know you knew, but I realized we didn't tell everybody else. So with that framework, thinking about how, especially from a neurodivergent perspective, like what it is like to have to learn to communicate differently than I think maybe neurotypical people experience in their lives about like taking for granted communication.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I really, for me, and one of, I think, the positive things that I gain from having a neurodivergent brain is that, and having an acting background where we learn about subtext.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn you can say any text you want, and it can be nonsense, even text, but there's always something under it, which is like what the person's goal is or what they're driving for, right? And I think I'm always looking for that, both in my role, where I'm talking about operations or working on relationships in the professional setting, and also with my kids or with my family, right? Trying to see, okay, here are the words that you're saying, but your body language or what I know has happened in the past is not aligned with what's happening. Or, gosh, can you say like vibes? Sometimes the vibes are off. I don't know.
Yeah. You just have a sense.
Yeah.
The energy, is that what you said?
Yeah.
I think it's like there is I think that there is a stereotype that especially comes with, I think, an autism diagnosis, but really just like being neurodivergent in general, of taking things quite literally. I know that with my ADHD and most likely odd ADHD, though I don't have a formal autistic diagnosis, that I have had to train myself to really pay attention for subtext. And subtext sometimes is in tone, like you were saying, tone of voice, body language, the hesitation that they take, the way that they look away in a moment, what's not being said that I was expecting to be said, what words are missing, not just what's literally being said. But I think that there's this like stereotype of taking things literally, that having to train yourself to pay attention to all of that I think that people take for granted, is what you're getting at, right? Of being able to like be in attunement with that. And not only being in tune with it, but brave enough and skilled enough to speak to it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious about both. Because I keep stacking questions on you. with your kids, how do you see, like with your family, that willingness to use that skill and name it and take a step back and talk about what you're experiencing from their communication rather than what the topic is? How does that show up?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because that is what I want to talk about. I was sitting here holding on to this thought. So the way brains work, especially before like 25 years of age, is that the prefrontal cortex is not yet developed. So that means a lot of things might happen more towards the hindbrain, which is more instinctual. So, and especially if kids haven't had a chance to work on regulation tools, which frankly, like my kids have worked extensively on regulation, and it's still a challenge. It's still a challenge. Speaking of, can I have a minute? I mean, a lot of minutes.
Can I have more?
Not right now. I'll talk to you in a little bit. Yeah, like
I swear that wasn't scripted, y'all.
he sensed that I was speaking about him. So, one of the hugest challenges I have had as a parent, because I taught for 8 years or something like that, and then I was in administration and early childhood, and I still had never experienced a child being so working so hard to protect themselves emotionally, working so hard, like their brain saying we will survive this conflict at all costs, but actually the issue being something like completely opposite of what they're saying. For a big example is, one of my kids, when they hurt someone physically, emotionally, they know they have done harm, they actually will tend to double down on that issue and be like, well, they deserved it. Or, and that's the big one that makes me go, or they caused it. Well, it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't done X, Y, Z. And for a while, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm raising a sociopath. Like, what am I going to do? Right?
Yeah.
And it took a minute for me to dig deeper and to have those connections with my kid in non-heightened situations, to dig deeper and go, wow, actually, it hurts them so deeply when they harm someone else. They feel it. You and I talk sometimes about rejection sensitivity disorder, and that is a situation where even if someone gives you a little critique, you feel it like a huge, like catastrophic, this person maybe hates you, right? Like it spirals. And sometimes deeply feeling kids have similar things happen where, wow, if I admit that I harmed someone, it makes me a horrible person. And so I cannot agree to that. And so I will use whatever tactics I can come up with to not be that person. And it has taken so much work for me in those moments of everyone feeling heightened to say, okay, we need to take a minute. I see that you're really upset. We can take space. I could sit with you, or you can go do whatever you need to do to calm down using those regulation kind of tools. But we're all going to like disassemble at this moment and do what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And then we can talk about this in a different way. I think that works sometimes with adults too. Yeah. But that has been the biggest, like, wow, literally the opposite thing is happening here. But if people, adults that don't know that, I've seen teachers that are just doing the exact opposite thing of what would be helpful in that moment, because they don't realize that this child is just trying to protect themselves. They are like, oh, this is a bad kid, or this kid is mouthy, or whatever. And it's like, wow, if you don't have that ability to connect with this kid, you're never going to get them. And they will maybe self-fulfilling prophecy into what you're describing them as, even though that's the opposite of what they want in their sweet little kid hearts.
Yeah. And I think that like what you're speaking to is so closely aligned with one of the aspects of spherical listening, and one of the ways that we can train ourselves to be tuning in to a connection and communication, which is assumption checking. Like, so, and being able, and that starts with being able to become consciously aware of your own assumptions, right? So in the example that you just gave about the teacher who's assuming they're mouthy or just a bad kid or whatever, those are assumptions. Now, it might be coming from a pattern of behavior, something like that. I'm not saying that assumptions come from nowhere, right? But there is this assumption that this kid is maybe doing it just because they're bad, or because they have an attitude or whatever. And being able to recognize that as an assumption and challenge yourself to assume good intentions, and saying, but what if that weren't true? What else could be underneath that could be causing this? Sometimes the way to get at that answer, whether it's with kids, because obviously, as you have heard me say a zillion times, I am not a parent, and I recognize that being a teacher and being a parent are two very different things. But in my past life of being a teacher and working with kids, and oh, I know I can see it's blue. Sorry, there's the ADHD. But in my past life of being a teacher and an educator, what I was going to say is,
Sorry.
to me. No, I'm glad I got to see that it was blue. I'm sorry that I got distracted by it. Whether you're dealing with kids or adults, is that sometimes it's hard to challenge those beliefs about that person because you're like, well, the pattern tells me this, or I already know this about them. So you're not even willing to challenge your own self. So a trick that I use for myself is, if it were me who did the same thing, why would I be doing that? Now, sometimes your brain still resists that and goes, I would never, right?
Not me.
Not me, but, and then maybe sometimes putting it in the context of someone who you care about, but you don't have those same assumptions about. What would I do if it were this person instead of this person? What would I might believe about them? And then you're already coming in with other options about what could be going on. And now you're assumption checking, and you're coming from a place of assuming good, not just they're being mouthy. Now, you might discover they just have an attitude in that moment, in that day. But most of the time, those kinds of attitudes or an energy are coming from a place of vulnerability, whether it's an adult or a child anyway. So recognizing that, breath in, breath out is the breath in. I'm recognizing, challenging my own assumptions. I'm seeing it. And the internal breath out is, okay, what will I feel instead? Or challenge myself to see possibly instead. And then it leads to, what are the right questions to ask? So instead of assuming and coming at the entire situation like they meant to hurt somebody, and they're doubling down on it's okay to hurt somebody, if we take a step back and then challenge, and we assume good intentions and that there's vulnerability happening, how does that change the question that we ask the person in front of us? And that's the key thing, I think. And then how do we listen, truly listen to that answer? So with all of that monologue, when you're thinking about challenging those assumptions and listening differently, are there particular kinds of questions that you find yourself asking, or types of questions that make it easier to start really sussing out what's really going on versus what seems to be going on the surface?
I think that one of the really important things is to challenge that whatever the behavior was like unacceptable, whether it is someone I'm working with in like an HR kind of a situation, or if it's one of my kids, like, you are a good person. You are a good worker. I appreciate the things that you do. Like, we are not, I think lots of folks like will conflate a single issue into all of the issues that have ever been. And that's what makes these things like really overwhelming sometimes to deal with. So I always try to drill it down to, we're literally talking about this one thing right now. Mm-hmm. And you are a good person, and folks make mistakes, and we're here to look at that from different angles and see how we can solve whatever the problem is. And I think that, especially when talking to my kids, you literally have to go through a checklist in your head of all of the things, especially, with neurospiciness in the mix, right? Are they off their routine? Are they hungry? Are they tired? Because though all of those base things are not met, you're not going to have a conversation anyway. So sometimes it's not even going into the next part of the conversation. It is we are just going to take away what, you know, if it's the kids hurting each other or something. We're just going to play in different rooms at this point to address this later. But when talking to adults, you know, I really, and I know that this is also something you really like to do, like allowing them to bring their whole selves into the conversation. I remember back in my like center director days in early childhood, you know, I would have people that they were late always. They were late every day, all the time. And I would have superiors saying to me, these are infractions and they need to be punished and we need to be, you know, you get the PIP, you get this and that. But the actual issue, once you drill down and ask some questions about what's going on, is that they don't have a reliable car, or the way their life schedule is working. Like they want it to work, and people want things sometimes that just aren't possible. We wish things to be true, and they're just not. I think that that's something that I'm getting fairly good at, and I don't know if it's despite my neurodivergence, but just looking at things like, we're going to call a spade a spade. Like, you only have 30 minutes to get ready in the morning, and if that cannot get you out the door, then you need a different in time, or if that's just not functional with this job, then we need to talk about that, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that drill down is really important to say, what are we even actually dealing with here? And do you feel safe enough to talk to me about that so I can actually help?
Yeah. And I think that, like, going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation about being transparent about your own vulnerabilities and flaws, especially as a leader, it obviously can be a double edge. You have to find that balance, right? You don't want to be a hot mess of somebody where, yeah. But there is this sense that if the people who you are influencing can see you working in real time through problems or challenges or limitations or weaknesses that you have, and being open about that, then it creates that space that it's okay to then those people be vulnerable and open with you, that it really is safe. And like always reiterating, like you said, like, you're not a bad person. Like, we would, like, especially, like, I understand you're stuck with your kids because they're your kids. But you've heard me say so many times in professional settings, when we're having important conversations, trying to solve for an issue, that I'm having this conversation with you because I know that you are a good worker, that you care about your work, that this matters to you. If I didn't already believe those things about you, I would be making different choices about how I'm solving for this. And so please know that I'm having this conversation because I believe those things about you. And I imagine you don't want those things happening either, right? So let's solve for it. And sometimes I think that, like, as a leader, it can be really humbling. Sometimes I have the awareness personally as a leader ahead of time, and I come in recognizing that what I think should be the solution, or what I even think the problem is, like, not the problem causing it, but like what is the desirable outcome, I guess, is really what I'm saying. It might need to shift. Other times we have blind spots, especially when we're used to having to be the person that everyone's relying on to have those kinds of answers about what are expectations, what are the desirable outcomes. That, like, the example that you gave about when you were the center director and you're this even though you're the director of an entire center and in charge of all these people, you still have corporate above you. So you're stuck in this, like, middle management, even though you're in this top tier leadership in this environment, right? All of this, and this person doesn't have reliable transportation. Well, I think that'll, and tell me if this assumption is wrong, but to me, it sounds like probably a lot of times those corporate leaders are going to say, you've got to find somebody who has reliable transportation. We've got to replace the person, or you've got to help them solve for that so that they can be on time. And instead of thinking, well, are they, outside of being consistently, however late, 10 minutes, 15, I don't know, are there other issues with their performance? Or is that literally the only issue with their performance? If that's literally the only issue with their performance, can we adjust their arrival time? And if it's about needing them for a certain amount of time, can they just shift their arrival time by 15 minutes, 30 minutes? And now there are no problems.
No.
All we now have to solve for is their coverage in that half hour that someone else needs to take care of. And will that be balanced by that person staying later, that we can balance whatever that is, right? Now it's a totally different thing we're solving for than you better figure out how to get here on time.
Oh my gosh. And can you imagine, I ended up doing just exactly what you
suggested. Oh my gosh, really?
Mm-hmm, because that was what should have been done. And can you imagine like the gap in client delivery if all of a sudden this person is just gone from the lives of 16 children and the adults that care for them? The cost of hiring, the cost of training, all the things that I would have had to have done to then find now substitutes for this class because we are offboarding, you know, it's such a knee-jerk reaction. And I mean, but this goes all the way back to some folks just be in that hind brain, right? Mm-hmm. Like they don't want to, that's judgy. They are not able to, for whatever reason, get into the front part of their brain and go, what are some of these solutions? What is outside of the box? They're just like late, insubordinate, and they're like, get rid of them, you know? So yeah, I think it's really important to be able to look at yourself and say, in what ways am I going to that insubordinate place in my brain instead of, can we talk through this? Can we think through this? I am very aware of some places as a parent that, oh man, when that kid rolls their eyes at me, I'm like, you're grounded for 200 years. That's weird. That's a strange reaction, but that's a trigger for me, you know? I think it's really important to look at yourself and look at your leadership or leadership of adult humans or tiny humans and say, when am I just making a knee-jerk decision? And when am I really giving space to all the different possibilities?
Yeah. And I think that like realizing that makes me think about some of the other aspects of spherical listening. One of them being that alignment piece, that we're on the same team solving for a problem outside of us. The problem is not you. The problem is something outside. And we have to agree even on what that problem is. So first steps first is we're on the same team no matter what the problem is. And I think that's something that I think ego gets in the way of. Even myself sometimes, of like, no, I know what the problem is. And I'm okay that they're not the problem, but that is the problem and we're going to solve for that, right? But being willing to say the first step of listening is making sure that that person feels cared for and has space to express themselves around whatever your perception of the issue is. And I think the perception of issue is the key phrase there. I can't tell you how many times I have to sometimes like talk myself down from things that make me really upset and then go, okay, this is my perception of what's going on. How am I going to go into this conversation? This person matters to me, whether they're a colleague or a friend or, an employee or whatever. We are not going to get anywhere if they don't feel like they have space to be heard. And I think that's where it connects to the presence piece, right? So you're like, I know that, at least for me, I'm having to navigate multiple ways of listening, hence the spherical listening, in the same conversation. So I have to know that when I'm coming into an important conversation like that my first job is holding space. And that is a really, I think, not a widely accepted thing in a professional setting, especially in corporate setting. To say my job as a leader, first and foremost, is to create space for you to feel safe enough to talk to me about this in a way that you're going to be truthful and authentic so that we can get at solving together. And that's also where then I'm going to be able to start listening and checking my assumptions already, even before we get into the meat of it. But like, if somebody feels accused or attacked, then, and doesn't, there we go. I was trying to go back to presence. Yay, technology. Right. But like, if you skip that step and you're even if you're like, I'm going to check my assumptions, I'm going to align on the solution. If you don't first slow down and say, hey, I have this perception. Can I check it with you? What's going on? And or you don't even tell them what your perception is. You just can sense something's up, and you start with, hey, I noticed something that is about their emotional well-being or mental, like about them and the care of them, not the care of the problem. Mm-hmm. And see kind of tuning in about like whether or not they're even comfortable opening up. Have you found, like, obviously I know that Quinovate is one of your like primary clients, but I also know that you work with other business owners and other parents. Like, how have you found coming at those kinds of issues? Like, I guess what am I trying to ask? Like, the presence point, like how do you see this showing up in other professional settings and or those places where you're helping people with the intersection of personal and professional too? Because I know that that's something that you do. You're working with professional women a lot of times, or women business owners, or neurospicy business owners, or someone who has all of those things and a parent, right? So like the intersectionality of all that, and then still being expected to hold space first.
Yeah. I do think because I try really hard, and when I fail, I ask for people to call me out on it, to create like shame-free zones. I think people have a lot of shame around things that they are consistently struggling with. And that can be something as simple as like, I don't understand how things are filed in this Google space and I can't navigate it. But my colleagues and peers think that I should be able to. So can you help me figure it out, right? There's a lot of feelings that are coming into what on the operations side, it's like organizing a Google Drive. No problem, right? We can do that. But there's a lot of feelings coming into this Google Drive. So I really try to create shame-free spaces. I definitely do that with my kids and any kids that I work with, on both levels. Your questions are not ever stupid. They're not ever like too off base or too taboo or anything like that, because it might seem completely out of the realm of possibility to tell your boss or someone that could take punitive action with your career, my car's been broken for however long, right? Like that might seem, I have shame around that even happening. I don't want to talk about that. So I really try to create spaces where I model, like you were talking about before, talking about things that I'm not carrying shame for. This is going on and we're not ashamed of it. We are struggling with it. So they feel comfortable with that. And I feel like a lot of professionals either they're kind of yearning for a space like that. So they're maybe not, that isn't their way of normally operating, but once they are in those kind of conversations, it feels easier to get those kind of layers to come off a little bit. Mm-hmm. Or like that's what they were seeking out to begin with, is I need a space where I can just, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like that just, it makes me think of the fact that even with our Quinovate team and then the clients that we work with, and then being inside their businesses, working with their teams, even though at Quinovate, we're intentional about screening our clients and that we only work with people who are values and mission aligned with us and understand that their businesses have an impact on the world and care about that impact, right? So we're already screening for all of that and working with people who are in alignment with that. And we still find spaces where we're not perfect. So like we make mistakes. So that's one thread I'll pull on of like, the appreciation I have about the radical candor of times that you have had to lovingly call me out, or the fact that no matter how much we or our clients who are business owners are trying to cultivate this culture of safety and culture of care, that there's so much cultural trauma where people have been used and abused, and treated like human capital, hence human resource, HR. That's why we don't use that term at Quinovate. That's why we, through our systems DNA, reframe that and work that with our clients, that we are thinking about the whole person always, because when you are treating somebody as a resource and not as a wholly, fully dimensional human that needs to be supported, then it always becomes about the transaction and the extraction, right? And I can't tell you how many times coming at it from a relational standpoint has made it so that people get to keep their jobs, that things are not treated like extraction and your car is broken down. But to that point, how many times have we worked with people who are like, well, yeah, like I understand that you say it's safe, but like to share those things. But if I told any other company that I worked for that happened, they would be afraid that I'm not going to show up and they would just fire me, or they would assume I'm unreliable or something. And so I'm curious about what it has been like from your perspective of helping not only within Quinovate, but within our clients' culture, team cultures, helping people how to heal from that, and how to help the leaders know that no matter how good you are at this, people are still in that place of healing. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah. And I think the piece that a lot of people don't want to hear about is that sometimes it does take time. Like, this is not a one and done situation, right? Like, I love it when I sit down with someone for the first time and they're like, this is who I am, this is what's going on, and we can just talk really candidly. But because so many people have been burned from being that kind of a person, especially in a career setting, business setting, it might take a while for them to understand, like, this concept is not just something that it's not the latest fad. It's not a trend that we're listening to our people now, right? Like, this is truly like a value that we have. And I think it takes knowing someone for a while and meeting them multiple times. And I know that schedules get crunchy and it's hard to sit down with people for extended periods of time. But I would say both for working with clients and also for working with kids, the more time you can pour into them, or the more quality time, I should say. Like, we don't need to drown people with trying to make appointments and things, but spending quality time with people where you can have good conversations, where they're starting to feel more and more comfortable, it's going to set you up for when that hard thing happens. So, I mean, as part of onboarding processes, right? We would set up, here's our cadence of how often we want to speak with you. Here's how often we'd like to speak with your team, so that we can be developing that rapport, so that when things get hard, they are more likely to open up to those conversations.
I think that I'm so glad that you brought that up. That like sparks like 15 things. Like, so thing number one is, especially but I imagine, I'm curious if this would work in a family setting. I think it might, but in business settings, where even if you're trying to create this culture of I'm here, I'm listening, I'm there for you, that without those formal scheduled check-ins, especially with people who are not in the habit or practice of being open and sharing, or being asked their opinions, ideas, feelings, experiences, that not having those formal structures means that no matter how much you say you have an open door policy, people are not going to initiate. People don't like to initiate, period. So you have to initiate for them, and you have to initiate like to listen, right? I'm not here to talk to you. I am here to listen to you, and or at least it is a two-way. It's like one of the things I love about what you and I have created together at Quinovate is that you helping build out my vision of 360 performance reviews. And not even performance reviews, like 360 success calibrations, which is like us taking that step back and saying what's working and what's not in our relationship to this individual and our roles within the company. And because I believe in having a responsibility to the whole person, that means their whole career and life outside of my company. And so I love that you and I were able to like create this space where people they feel safe and comfortable to tell us about their career plans that are above and beyond. You and I are going through that right now. You talking about all of the different ways that your business is growing and developing, and how that affects the work that we're doing together, right? And that makes it so much easier and smoother than if you are secretly working on, I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but here we are working on these plans. And then all of a sudden, here we are, you give me 2 weeks notice, I'm blindsided, all the fallout from that, right? Instead, we go, oh, cool, you're building this thing. What can I do to help you build it? Also, what does that mean for a timeline for the work that we're doing together, right? So that we can plan for that. Yeah. And I'm very proud of the fact that with very few exceptions, like both within Quinovate and previous companies that I've led and owned, that like I get a lot of notice from people when they're wanting something more in their career. Like I literally know that like with my children's theater, my education director, when he was ready to move on, like was actively applying for jobs and asked me to write him a recommendation letter. And I was like, I'm literally writing the letter to get someone to take you away from me, but I will do it because I care about your well-being and you're ready to move on. And then that made him even more, not made him, that what I loved about that relationship is that he cared enough about the health and wealth and success of me in the business that he also did what was in his power to make sure that was a smooth transition too, right? And so I think that like that just reminded me of that, and that you and I have been building that out and iterating that together for several years now, and then infusing that into our clients' companies. I have a question, and then the other thread I want to pull on, but I'm gonna is related to like what HR like stereotypically or historically look like, but I'm putting a pin in that. The question I want to ask you is, what from your perspective has been like the key pieces to helping build in those authentic moments of like listening and connecting within a business or an organization?
I think that noticing that someone not even is struggling, noticing that someone is different, noticing that something is out of sorts, out of character. At Quinovate, we have a team member of the Q crew that every single morning says good morning to everyone and like shares things. And I love him. And I think there was a couple mornings where I was like, hey, where's the good morning? Like if he doesn't say good morning, I assume something tragic has occurred. Like, and that's a silly example. But there are absolutely things where something is, if it's out of character for that person, do not wait until, because like you were saying, they might not come knock on your door. Mm-hmm. So being proactive in saying, hey, I noticed this a couple times. And, you know, that's just, and I'll even say, I thought that it seemed like you were sad, or it seemed like you're distracted, or it seemed, and I'll ask, is that a proper, you know, is that what's going on, or something else going on? And it could be, you know, I've had people ask this question of me, and I'm like, oh gosh, no, I was distracted by my grocery list. I'm totally fine. Like I browned out for a minute. I'm like,
Yeah.
that is sometimes the case, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not.
Well, and I think that like having somebody on your team who is paying attention to those things and it's their job, that's what I rely on you for, right? And I think it's been fun to also like work on the development of different roles and iterations of the work that you've done with us. Obviously, one of our core values is savvy resource stewardship. And so we believe that businesses deserve really high quality, excellent support, even if it's not a full-time in-house person. Hence me offering fractional COO services, hence you offering your services fractionally, right? So you are integrated into my team, even though you are a separate business and entity, and being able to work in that kind of way has been really lovely, because I think that as we have created the iterations of your role inside of Quinnovate, that has then informed and helped support the roles and iterations that we are able to help teach others to do too. And that brings up like that role of like stereotypical or traditional HR, right? And I don't, as you know, I am not a big fan of the term HR, and I try to limit myself, push myself away from that concept, because I think that stereotypically they have a reputation of being for the company, right? And because you're being managed as a resource of the company, not as a person that needs care. And so that's why I had originally created that people and culture concept of, no, really, this person is here, yes, to keep the company is one of the stakeholders. We have to take into consideration the wellness of the business, but that's not the only thing that we're caring about the wellness of, right? And so the responsibility of, how do I say, caring for multiple stakeholders at once, I think is a higher level skill that I think that maybe people take for granted when they're trying to make these kind of conscious shifts and the conscious leadership. And that I really admire your ability. I'm going to get emotional. But I admire your ability to understand the importance of the complexity of managing multiple people's well-being and multiple entities' well-being at the same time, because that is not an easy thing to do. And that's what the role, in my perspective, of people and culture manager does, is understanding that you're balancing the needs of the company and the balance of the needs of the people. And then as your role has developed, and now as the director of relational operations, of thinking about how does that zoom out, not just to the team, but our relationships in all directions with stakeholders, right? So now your focus is, what is our relationship to our stakeholders of our, strategic partners and our vendors and our community and all our clients, all of that. So first of all, I just want to say I admire your ability to not just conceptually get it, but in real time, I see you navigating the complexities of having to do those 360. You have to be creating those 360 wins all the time, right? Or looking for the ways to do that. But I had an aha for the first time in this conversation, that when I've been trying to explain to people what is people and culture manager, and the way I've always been saying it most recently is that it's just the conscious version of HR, right? But I don't think it takes it far enough to understand that it's not just being like, okay, we're going to, make sure that we have wellness practices. And I realized that the analogy is that you are somehow both HR. So you are the traditional, I'm representing the company, and the union rep.
Yeah.
And that is what we have asked, right? Of that kind of role, is that you are responsible for the well-being of that individual, and you are responsible for the well-being of the company and its need for humans to complete the work, right? And so you are simultaneously HR and union rep, and being able to create a role like that is not a conflict of interest. So I'm curious, now that I've had this aha and I've just shared it for you live for the first time, first of all, what's your response to that? And secondly, what do you do to manage all of that? That's a genuine question. I have no idea.
Sure. I do think it kind of feels like that, actually, like if I now have relationships with the folks at Quinovate that I think that they're pretty quick to come to me with something. So, and when someone does, like, I am taking care of that person in that moment. I'm listening to them. I am making sure I get all of the information or pull out the information that's not being given, and then try to do some of those spherical listening kind of question asking and things like that. But I think that it comes from having a company where and I think that also the people we work with understand this, where it can be true that things are happening in someone's life, right? Like, there can be small things and there can be huge things. And it is also true that the company is going to need certain things to function. Mm-hmm. And in an ideal world, we would want the company to easily be able to pivot to whatever someone needs, for functioning sake. But I think that being able to work with you often, or I'll usually start to come up with ideas, but being able to brainstorm with you, okay, here we now have this new set of needs that we didn't know about before. Is there enough flexibility right now to pivot to meet those needs and still have everyone be happy? Or at a certain point, are there boundaries that we need to set to say, gosh, we would love to accommodate these needs. Here's to the extent that we can. And then after this point, we cannot. And let the folks that we're talking to about it see, does a small solution work, right? Is that enough? Or are we moving towards, gosh, that's not going to work, so now what? But it's never if I share this, I'm going to be let go, right? It's never and sometimes, gosh, people are so hesitant, and really, I'm going to say kind of across the board, both my work in Quinovate and then work I'm doing on my own, people are so hesitant to ask for what they need. So hesitant. And even when they do, and maybe I'm people, maybe I'm here too, I'm going to ask for like this much of what I need, right? And I think the more we can really get a picture of, what would serve you? What would make you thrive as a person? How can we make that happen? And how can we try to grow alongside each other to say, that opportunity does not exist right now. But this is literally a question on our 360 reflections. What is an opportunity that doesn't exist right now, but you wish it did? What could that look like, if not for you in your time, for someone in the future that comes to Quinovate? How can we grow that opportunity? And to speak to what you were saying earlier, even if that's outside of Quinovate, wow, I would love to connect you with that thing that would feed your soul. I would love to connect you with that network or that idea, or, that is going to make you thrive, and hope that there's a piece of it, here for both things to be true. But we don't want a bunch of people working for us that are smothering their desires and are just punching time clocks. Like, that does not a healthy company make.
No. And I think that, like, to that point, I think that, like, what you're speaking to is that, like, this aligns. I think that our values align very much with conscious capitalism 4 pillars that I threw conscious capitalism, or not conscious capitalism, conscious leadership, which is one of the 4 pillars up on the screen. I have been a part of the Chicago Conscious Capitalism chapter for several years and have served in leadership positions as a volunteer there. But as you know, but the audience may not. So thinking about like how to take it a step further, and it's that advocating on behalf of the person you're leading and learning how to do that, not stopping at their whatever they're requesting, but truly being dedicated to their success, even if it means that how do I say this? I think sometimes people offer solutions that benefit the company more than them, and that the company may not even need that much of a benefit. Sometimes you go, great, yep, that's what we need. Other times people are selling themselves short because they're afraid to ask for what they need, or they don't want to, because they do care about the relationship, whatever is motivating that. And so being willing to take it a step further in that conscious leadership, in that director of operational, relational operations, or in people and culture, whatever kind of level you're at, thinking about, or, you know, as the CEO, and this is just the value of our company, no, I'm going to advocate for you further, and I'm going to show you what you're worth. You deserve this, and making offers above and beyond what people are asking for. I think that sometimes I have to challenge myself to remember I also have learned behavior of cultural conditioning, I guess is what I'm saying, that I have to challenge in myself, where I'm like, well, they should advocate for themselves. Well, they should, but no one's ever shown them how. They've never been safe enough to do it. So let me advocate for them so that they can see what's possible. And I think that that's what I really like about teaming up with you, because I think that you and I do well in that. And I think that there are times that you help catch blind spots of mine where I might be running on some of that cultural conditioning. And you advocate for someone, and I might have that initial like, why are you doing this? They should do it for themselves. I'm like, no, you're right. Let's teach them how. So I think that that's something I've really appreciated in our journey together too. Yeah. See your wheels turning.
Yeah, I was thinking about the balancing of it, that it helps to know as much as you can about what the business needs, and to empower. I feel like I talk about this a lot when we're working with clients and their teams, to empower the team to understand what the company needs, or what the goals are, or so that there's not a lot of surprise on either side. Sometimes, like, if someone was going to be completely against our values, they would know that that's not going to work, and they would not be surprised by that, because they know our values. I know a lot of small businesses, like, they're trying to build out, documents and assets and things like that. But even just, cluing teams into strategic planning, or empowering new leadership on a team to make decisions, and to do things, and to do things badly sometimes, and to grow,
Yeah.
I think that I am not afraid to hear all the sides of conversations. I am not afraid of big feelings.
That's so good working for me.
As an owner of them, as a raiser of them, as a
collaborator,
of them. Big feelings are a thing in my life. So I think a lot of people are afraid of having big feelings, or of causing big feelings. Like, so talking about like a cultural learned behavior, right? Like, oh, it would be so horrible of me to make them have a moment of, shoot, how are we going to do this? It's so inconvenient of me to do that, and I think sometimes it's just not that serious. Like, you can just go ahead and ask and let the powers that be, whoever it is, let them filter that, for you.
Yeah. And I think that, like, as a feeler of big feelings, I have a lot of cultural shame around that. And even being a business owner, like, I think that sometimes, like, feelers of big feelings who have not learned to take care of themselves can be quite toxic. And I know I don't want to be that kind of leader. So I always had a lot of pressure on myself to, Elsa, like, conceal, don't feel, like, right. And the more I have relaxed out of that as a leader, and been willing to be vulnerable with my feelings, the more I've seen our team feel safe and go, oh, she's human, right? I know we're needing to wrap up anyway. So I'll bring us home. I know that we could talk about this literally all day if we wanted to. Couple of things I forgot to even mention. The 26th and the 30th. So next Thursday. Yeah, next Thursday. And then the following Monday, Quinnovate's going to be, I'm going to be leading free spherical listening workshop sessions, so that if people are interested in honing these skills and how we train people to use these skills, they can come check it out, and you can learn more about it and sign up at quinnovate360.com/listen. And then, Jenn, where should people find you? If people want to connect with you directly, not with your work specifically with Quinnovate, but just with you in the world, what's the best way for people to find you and connect with you?
Yeah. On LinkedIn is probably the easiest place. My kind of hard to spell last name is luckily right here on the screen. I appreciate. And actually, my email address is my name with a dot at gmail.com. So jen.wisegarver@gmail.com. I know Cassandra and I were just talking about summer solstices today, and people are really feeling like this transition into a new season. Myself with kids at home now full time. And if folks are feeling the strain of different routines or trying to understand how to structure the summer for themselves, be that in their business or in their family, I would love to talk to them about that and see where I can help.
And something that she didn't say, but that she should have, is it's not in your business or in your family. If you have both, understanding, like, the overlap that doesn't have to be siloed, being able to look at that and how does that all fit together. And even without business owners, just like, how does my whole life fit together in these different seasons of transition? So it would be remiss not to point out that you are very capable of helping people navigate that, both in the Quinnovate side and our clients, and then with the folks I see you working with outside of that. So I will make sure as we wrap up that I go to our recordings and make sure that the link to your LinkedIn is in the comments, so that it's super easy to find you. That way people don't have to listen an hour and 12 minutes in. It'll just be right there to be like, Jenn's awesome. This is where to find her. Anything else we should share before we wrap up today?
No, thank you for the hour and 12 minutes. You're right that we easily could be a talk show for a day.
I know, right? So maybe sometime we'll set up more regular segments together. But for now, we'll wrap up there. Thank you for anyone who has made it all the way through. It's always so great to hang out with you, and we'll wrap up there. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.